What fan theory do you 100% accept as true? The Empire Strikes Back, Admiral Ozzel is a rebel spy. Everything Ozzel does in his brief bits of screen time is to the detriment of the Empire. When the probe droid finds the rebel shield generator, Ozzel tries to dismiss it as smugglers before Pete speaks out of turn and gets Vader involved. Later, Ozzel orders the fleet out of hyperspace too quickly, giving the rebels plenty of time to activate the aforementioned shield generator that Ozzel knew about. Clumsy as he is, stupid or rebel sympathizer who gave his life to give the Alliance as much time to evacuate their base as possible? I side on the latter. The reason each It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode starts with a date and time is because they're all testifying against each other in court. Miguel and Tulio may not be gods, but the armadillo that follows them around absolutely is. It's just helping them out because they saved it from being eaten. That Loki was controlled by the Tesseract more than he let on. His eyes glowed multiple times and he shed a tear when Thor tried to talk sense into him. In Disney's Ratatouille, the old lady in the beginning of the movie living in the house next to the river is the food critic, Anton Ego's mother. In the flashback scene where he eats the ratatouille you can see similarities of the house from the beginning, her face and I think the bridge. The Jetsons and the Flintstones are living at the same time in a dystopian future where the haves live above the clouds and the have-nots are stuck on a wasted earth. The signs include that Flintstones celebrate things like Christmas and other holidays, which doesn't make sense, and the Great Gazoo alien appears in both series. The town from Footloose is the same town from Tremors. The ban on dancing wasn't a puritanical attempt to control the youth. The town elders were aware of the graboid threat, and banned dancing out of the fear that it would cause rhythmic vibrations waking up the creatures sleeping below the town. Kevin Bacon's character in Footloose stayed in the town, growing up to be his character in Tremors, at which point he has to try and contain the danger he inadvertently released. Kevin alone, if not actually a genius, is certainly much smarter than he lets on. Clearly he's lazy, and gluttonous, and blah blah blah, but after the merger with Stamford, and it's revealed that Martin had served time, Kevin realizes that he needs to give plausible deniability to any sort of financial maleficence that the accountants have been doing, and Flanderizes himself in front of the camera. Occasionally he slips up and reveals himself to be something, a math genius, and has to backtrack, and play it off as some kind of food-based idiot savant. It's how he was able to afford ownership of the bar at the end of the series. I'm sure he made a bit just cashing in all those free drinks, but actually enough to buy a bar? I don't believe it. Red Alert 1's Allied victory results in the Red Alert 2/3 universe. Red Alert 1's Soviet victory leads to the Tiberium universe. Debunked by the writers themselves, but that's how it'll always be for me. Little late to the game, but the theory is that the Kyber crystal in Luke's green lightsaber is the same one from Qui-Gon Jinn's. After Kenobi defeats Darth Maul with his master's lightsaber, he would have kept it as a keepsake, despite rebuilding his own saber. It's likely he would have retrieved it and kept it with him after the Order 66 attack. After the Empire takes over, they destroy all artifacts and memory of the Jedi in their purge of changing the history, and most Kyber crystals go towards powering the Death Star. Because of this, any lightsaber crystal would have been very difficult for Luke to find after he loses the Skywalker saber. But we know he returns to Tatooine to complete his new lightsaber, likely returning to Ben Kenobi's home for components, where he would have found Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber and recycled its crystal. James Bond's primary purpose is to be a distraction to keep attention off the spies who actually spy. Villains and other spies know him, he rarely takes an alias, he makes his presence known early on and keeps messing up operations for the villains, but other spies have already infiltrated their ranks and work while Bond does as much visible damage as possible to keep the others safe. Glinda dropped Dorothy's house on the Wicked Witch of the East, not the tornado, and uses her to gain control of Oz. One of the first things Glinda tells Dorothy is that she killed the witch. They praise her so she'll accept it, and when the Witch of the West comes along, who killed her sister? Dorothy. Glinda then puts the ruby slippers on Dorothy's feet but does not tell her that she can use them to go home. Instead, she sends Dorothy to Oz in possession of objects that a witch would murder her for. Dorothy, being forced into a situation where her only salvation is Oz and her worst enemy is the Queen, inadvertently exposes the Wizard of Oz as a fraud and murders the Witch of the West. Now, who's left to rule Oz? Glinda fucking Witch of the North. She used Dorothy as an expendable pawn to gain control of Oz without having to leave her bubble. And when Dorothy is done upheaving the two biggest powers in Oz, Glinda sends her home and makes her think it was all a dream. Event Horizon is a prequel to the Warhammer 40k universe. That the book Rory writes in the Gilmore Girls revival is the original show, that explains why the characters are so different from the show versus revival miniseries. She's looking back at the past with rose-colored glasses. Beavis and Butthead have fetal alcohol syndrome. I have one of my own. Buffy's mother Joyce's brain aneurysm occurred indirectly because of Dawn. Not through magic or anything directly supernatural. But she was Dawn's mother and therefore she would have the most artificially created memories, conception, pregnancy, life, thoughts, fears, etc. This caused so much real physical change to her brain overnight, that it created real medical problems and killed her. This is never hinted at all in the show. The real world in the Matrix movies is just another layer of the Matrix, designed specifically to appeal to people unwilling to conform to the normal matrix. Humans in this outer matrix have confirmation of their belief that something was wrong, and get to indulge in the fantasy of being a heroic freedom fighter against the faceless evil machines, thus choosing to accept this false reality. The anomaly of the One is that he's capable of rejecting both realities, which is the reason why he had powers in the real world. Pokédex entries are written by young trainers. When a professor sends a bunch of 10-year-olds out into the world to document Pokémon, of course the research can't be expected to be professional in the least. This is how we end up with the creepy legends of ghost Pokémon that might have been passed around as playground rumors, or impossible facts like Makago being hotter than the actual sun. There's no reason why out of all the Pokémon professors, one of them couldn't have revised their dex information and correct the tidbit about Pidgeot breaking the speed of light or Gardevoir creating black holes or Blazikens jumping over 30-story buildings. It's likely they leave the kids to their own devices without bothering to fact check, and kids, being kids, are going to exaggerate. Robb Stark died twice, first in his own body, and second in Grey Winds. He had a chance to see Arya moments before his death. King of the Hill, Dale knew about Nancy and John Redcorn, but feigned ignorance. Both to keep his home life stable, and because he knew Joseph would be raised as his son rather than Redcorn's. The monsters in Courage the Cowardly Dog are regular people but seem monstrous from Courage's perspective, since he's cowardly. Also they live in the middle of nowhere because his owners never take him out, so that's how he views the world. I 100% believe the two men accompanying the woman in the original Blair Witch Project planned and successfully executed a plan to murder her while they were deep in the woods. Too many factors point to good old-fashioned murder than a supernatural occurrence. Edit, I'm referring to the characters of the film, not the actors. Realized my language might be a bit ambiguous. Ed from Ed, Ed and Eddie is mentally stunted, which is why he's one of the dumber characters in the show despite appearing older than the other two Eds. He's about as tall as Kevin and Rolf, who are some of the oldest kids in the cul-de-sac. Also that his parents are abusive to him because of his mental handicap, literally removing the stairs when he was grounded, and his sister's attitude towards him is learned behavior from their parents. This is further reinforced by him living in the basement, having non-existent hygiene habits, and retreating into obsession with TV and sci-fi comics. In fact, the other two Eds come from troubled homes as well, which is why they're social outcasts in the cul-de-sac. It's been heavily implied that Eddie's parents knew his older brother was physically abusive to him and let it happen. Meanwhile, Double D's parents spend zero time with him, and won't even directly communicate with their son, choosing instead to leave him notes for chores. Instead, Willy Wonka knew what he was doing. There was no seat for Augustus aboard that boat. He knew Augustus Gloop would fall in there. Sean Connery, John Patrick Mason, in The Rock was actually 007 who was captured while conducting espionage in the USA, after the events of the last Bond film with Connery, Diamonds Are Forever, then imprisoned at Alcatraz. Greg Heffley is a sociopath. Mr. Bean is an alien. That would explain his weird behavior and why he falls out of the sky at the beginning of every episode. Zion is a part of the Matrix. When the Red John suspect list came down to 7 names and Lorelei recited the names, only McAllister had a prefix, Sheriff, and not any other name. This shows he had a narcissistic personality, which was a well-known trait of Red John. Dennis Reynolds is a serial killer. Peach is totally into being kidnapped. No one who isn't doesn't have that little security. This is more of a personal fan theory than a common one, but the Titan in Titan E was designed to be powered by consuming dredge like it does at the end of the movie. That's why they attacked Earth. The Mad Max films do not take place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, it's just that's what happens when a bunch of Australians get lost in the desert. My own theory that in The Office when Andy proposes to Angela, the people playing his parents are different actors because they are literally actors. As in, he hired them to pose as his perfect parents because his own parents couldn't be bothered to come. The people in the season 9 episode Garden Party are his real parents, who clearly are dicks. This was a Reddit post a while ago actually, but the theory was, in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke tells R2 to stay in the ship at various times, he doesn't stay put, because the last person to tell him that was Anakin and he never came back. Bill Cipher is still alive inside Stan Pine's mind after the ending of Gravity Falls. The clues leading to this conclusion, from fans, were so complex. They actually involved traveling to real locations and solving puzzles. Mad Max and Waterworld take place at the same time on different parts of the same post-apocalyptic planet. They're just unaware of each other's existences. That Dora the Explorer is visually impaired. She needs the viewer's help to see something that's literally 3 feet away from her, and she doesn't look at things directly. Thank you for starting this thread. I forgot how fun fan theories are. Sebastian from Stardew Valley is a natural redhead. Peter Pan kills any lost boy that grows into adulthood. Captain Hook and his pirates are all lost boys that have escaped and aim to stop him. Spinach is just a front. Popeye is on steroids. Mad Max folktale theory, the movies and games all have different narrators and different takes on Max because they're all stories being told by people in the wasteland. All of these great deeds and accomplishments are being attributed to one man who may or may not have ever really existed. Double Matrix theory, the Matrix has an inner core and then an outer shell designed to give the illusion of escape. It's basically a corral where they can keep the escaped humans until a defense mechanism, the machines, can purge them. Sid isn't a bad kid by any means, just has a very troubled home life. The shit he does to those toys is undeniably creative. It's also his escaped. Here's a small clip where his dad is seen sleeping on a chair. I'd if y'all noticed by I saw a few beer cans next to the chair, but it could just be me. Watch the scene at Sid's house again and tell me why the sister has all this nice shit and a neat room, whereas Sid's room is a complete dump. Granted, that's just teenage dude instinct to leave a room like that, but there's also the fact that all the toys he fucks with are his sister's. There's obviously some jealousy and resentment towards his sister cause of his parents sucking as people and choosing favorites. All in all, I feel bad for the guy. He just wants to do what kids do and not have to deal with his harsh reality. Even grows up to work as a garbage man, which granted I hear pays decently, but correct me if I'm wrong please. But I'm glad he looks happy and somewhat content in Toy Story 3 tow. Dude's just vibing but still has a lot of personal issues probably. Edit, these replies are depressing me LMAO. The Paw Patrol pups are part of a post-AI initiative attempting to train enhanced, but subservient, companion animals to replace the robots that almost destroyed humanity. Everyone in Adventure Bay / Foggy Bottom / etc. are paid actors who place the pups in coordinated training exercises. Which is why Mayor Humdinger gets away with all his bullshit. Parenthood has melted my brain. Andy's parents are in the middle of a divorce when the first Toy Story is taking place. Pepe Sylvia is just Charlie trying to pronounce Pennsylvania. This is a little out there, but hear me out. The year 2015 we see in Back to the Future 2 is what would have happened if not for Chernobyl. Which leads to the argument that something in the movies, specifically 2 and 3, caused Chernobyl to happen. As you know, the year the characters are from is 1985, with Chernobyl happening in 1986. My take is, learning of the Libyans' attempt to procure plutonium, the Soviets send a spy to Hill Valley to learn more in order to prevent destabilizing relations during the Cold War. The spy arrives late, and in the timeline established by just the first movie, leaves. This is the timeline we see in the second movie, which is eventually erased. However, Doc Brown meddles with time again, and causes the events of the second and thus third movie. The spy witnesses the end of the third movie with the flying train, and assumes it's a new sort of aircraft. He investigates the scene after the main characters depart and finds wreckage of the DeLorean. Among the wreckage is some parts of the destroyed fusion reactor. Relaying findings to the Soviets, they get the impression that the US is significantly ahead of them in nuclear development. To combat this, they aggressively greenlight a bunch of nuclear projects, including a risky test that results in the Chernobyl meltdown. The resulting event scares people the world over and hinders nuclear research and progression. With lack of funding and roadblocks to more nuclear proliferation, fusion technology is never developed. Thus hampered, the timeline turns into hours. In the 2015 timeline shown in BTTF2, the nuclear research breakthroughs make the rest of the technology possible, including flying cars and hoverboards. With some developments happening in the late 80s, the economy is lifted and the downturn of the early 90s does not happen. This has an effect of extending the garish fashion of the 80s forward, hence why the clothes look different as well. Pinky is the genius. Even the theme song hints at the theory, one is a genius, the other's insane, they're Pinky and the brain. Miles Morales is considered a death omen among Peter Parkers who are aware of the multiverse. Edit, here's my explanation. Alright. As the other commenters are stating, Miles usually succeeds Peter as Spider-Man after Peter is killed. This happened in Spider-Verse, the Ultimate Comics, and I think it's implied that the same thing happened in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, though in an alternate universe. Not to mention, I bet a lot of people were expecting Peter to die at the beginning of the Miles Morales video game. Now, in Rick and Morty, a show in which the multiverse plays a huge role, alternate versions of characters tend to fulfill the same role which Ricks are generally aware of. Jerry's are awful, Morty's are stupid but necessary, Beth's must always be treated with kindness, etc. We see this in Spider-Man 2. Uncle Ben gets killed, Peter is romantically involved with someone with the initials M. J. Or Gwen Stacy, who usually meets a tragic end herself. He has a best friend named Harry Osborn who oftentimes ends up as an adversary, though may generally mean well. You get the idea. From here on in, it's pretty much all assumptions, so take everything with a grain of salt. While the idea of the multiversal community of doppelgangers is more often associated with Reed Richards, with the Council of Ricks even being a pun on Marvel's Council of Reeds, I personally believe that Peter may have the intellect to discover safe multiversal travel, make use of it and establish a similar community. And if these Peters can travel the multiverse, they may notice the patterns that we ourselves notice in all of these Spider-Man stories. Including Miles taking up the mantle of Spider-Man after that universe's Peters, usually violent, death. Maybe they treat their Miles getting his powers like we would being diagnosed with a terminal illness. Now that being said, it may be possible that some Peters may not save their Miles or prevent him from getting his powers in order to save themselves. Personally, I think this can be explored further by having a villain who is hunting down versions of Miles from across the multiverse. There was a precedent with Wolf Spider from the Ultimate cartoon, though he was interested in hunting down all spider people for his own megalomania. This wolf spider would be hunting Miles either in the name of vengeance for all the Peters or believes he is saving Peters who have yet to die, in a perverted sense. This is just a thought I had a year or two ago and would really like to see it explored. Kevin from The Office is secretly involved in a money laundering scheme. I can't imagine a guy as smart as him saying so dumb otherwise. Every Star Wars planet is like a quarter the size of Earth. How else does each planet have just one biome? Droids in Star Wars were reprogrammed to feel pain after the Clone Wars. In the prequels, droids were injured all the time without issue, even ones not meant for war. Keppo was decapitated, for example. But in the original trilogy, droids can clearly feel pain, they're even tortured by Jabba, and Keppo is often terrified of being injured. Peter Parker wasn't screwed out of his pay by that wrestling promoter. The promoter cut his pay because Peter didn't understand how wrestling worked. Wrestling isn't actual combat sport, it's putting on a show. The pay was for lasting 3 minutes in the ring, that makes it the match's time limit. If he did only that, it would have been fine. But not only did the match go under 3 minutes, he also defeated Bonesaw, the promotion's top guy. So the promoter not only had to send the crowd home earlier than he planned, but now his top guy looks weak too, because he got beat by a nobody. Amateur. Bonesaw's ability to draw a crowd was hurt by losing to Peter, negatively impacting that wrestling promotion's business. Edit: alright, so I've seen some of your comments, and I can answer them here. Bonesaw was really hurting people. Like that guy on a stretcher. And how he hit Peter with a steel chair. Guy on stretcher could have easily just been selling for Bonesaw. In wrestling, selling is acting as if you've been actually hurt by your opponent's moves, so as to make the match feel more like a genuine fight rather than the show that it is. And while wrestling may be just a show and not a fight, the physicality behind it is still real. And there's some things you can't fake in wrestling, like hitting someone with a steel chair. Wrestlers train themselves on how to take hits like that, to minimize the actual damage that their bodies have to take. I think Bonesaw thought that Peter must have had at least some pro wrestling training, so he assumed he knew how to take a chair shot. And even if he didn't think that, Bonesaw might have just been a stiff worker lol, which means a wrestler that hits you so hard that it actually does hurt. They should have filled Peter in on how it works if they didn't want him to beat Bonesaw. They should have rehearsed it. Some promoters like to issue shoot open challenges that invite total unknowns to defeat their top guy. In wrestling, a shoot is anything that is unplanned or unscripted. They're so confident that their top guy can beat anyone, that they don't bother filling in the challenges on what they actually wanted to happen, which can lead to mixed results. A good example of this would be Kurt Angle vs Daniel Puder in WWE. Kurt Angle issued an open challenge to some amateur wrestlers, to take him on in a shoot match and see if they can actually beat him. When amateur Daniel Puder answered Angle's challenge, he put him in a legitimate Kimura lock that, if he held it on for longer, would have broken Kurt's arm. Obviously professional wrestler and Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle couldn't be seen tapping out to an amateur, so the referees had to improvise an ending to the match where Kurt won, which he did. Kurt and everyone behind the scenes were not happy with Puder. The wrestling promoter went back on the agreement because he's an asshole. Carney, this is true. Lots of promoters are like that lol. He very well might have been just an asshole who didn't want to pay Peter, but the ad for the match did state last 3 minutes in the ring against Bonesaw, not defeat Bonesaw. So he can still claim that Peter didn't fulfill what they were asking for. Edit 2, I'd just like to clarify that I do not agree with the promoter in cutting Peter's pay. Absolutely he's an asshole, and if he didn't want Peter to beat his top guy, he should have at least filled him in first, instead of being overly confident that Bonesaw can take on anyone. But this theory explains why he did that, which I've come to believe as canon. And if you disagree with it still, then hey, that's fine. Just don't work yourself into a shoot, brother. Much love, HH. Not sure if this counts, but Donkey from Shrek being one of the kids from Pinocchio who turned into a donkey is pretty mind-blowing. Rick is Morty, and evil Morty is just a Morty that knows he'll become Rick if he doesn't deviate. Rick said I used to wear blue pants and when he's drunk he asks for redheads. Morty likes redheads. Can't think of other coincidences off the top of my head, but I rewatched some of those episodes under that context and it made sense. Jesse's girl is Stacy's mom. Jessica Fletcher killed all those people and framed others for it. No way that a lady just happens to be involved in a murder every week. Tom and Jerry were friends and not enemies. The secret ingredient is crab meat. Spoiler for American History X ahead. I don't know if this is a fan theory, but I always believed the boy that shot Annie was the younger brother of the guy Derek curb stomped and killed. That kid exacting revenge on his brother's killer by murdering the killer's brother speaks volumes emo. It also ties in beautifully with Danny's final speech about hate being baggage. So I always accepted that to be 100% true. Padme died because Darth Sidious used her to save Anakin. Scooby-Doo is a show about draft dodgers during the Vietnam War. House died in the fire in the final episode. The last 10 minutes where he rides off into the sunset with his best friend Wilson are his final hallucination. Edit, changed dying dream to final hallucination, as he was hallucinating during the whole episode and it's more in keeping with the theory. Captain Picard only speaks French, but thanks to the universal translators, no one would ever know. Mrs. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus is a Time Lord hiding from the Time War. The bus is a TARDIS with a working chameleon circuit. Much like the Doctor, she has a strange affinity for humanity, but instead of traveling across time and space preventing disasters, she teaches a class of 5th graders for reasons. This is my own personal one, but I have a lot of fun watching Keanu movies and imagining him as Ted traveling through the circuits of time to find Bill. Doctor and Rose in the parallel world are perfectly happy with each other. Inception, Leonardo's wedding ring is his totem. Not the spinning top. If you watch, he only wears it in dreams, never takes it off or puts it on, and no one ever touches it. The top was Mal's and doesn't work for him, which is why he always picked it up before a full spin. In Half-Life 1, one of the lines the scientists say is, "Do you know who ate all the donuts?" It was Gordon Freeman. That's why he doesn't talk. He doesn't want to risk anyone smelling his donut breath, or, alternatively, his mouth is just constantly stuffed with donuts. Palpatine used Padme's life force to save Anakin. Avatar: The Last Airbender takes place on a much smaller planet with lower gravity. This is why all of the characters can jump double/triple their height and fall multiple stories without grievous injuries. That the courier in Skyrim is a novice mage and uses the clairvoyance spell to find the Dragonborn. Barney from How I Met Your Mother isn't actually as much of a womanizer as Ted says he is. Ted's an unreliable narrator and could have presented this image of Barney to his kids either because he was jealous of Barney's relationship with Robin, or because he wants Barney to look unsuitable for her. That way, Ted's kids see Ted and Robin as soulmates. Scooby's snacks are actually just edibles and Shaggy/Scooby are really fucking high the entire time. Kermit caused 9/11, not really much of a fan theory though, since it's unintentionally canon. Edit, realized this should be explained. In the 2002 TV film It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, there's a part where an angel shows Kermit an alternate reality where he was never born. For whatever reason, the editors didn't really think about it, and continued to use footage with the Twin Towers still standing for this scene. However, they aren't there in his original universe. Therefore, something that Kermit did in his life, did in fact cause 9/11 in Muppet lore. George R.R. Martin is having a difficult time finishing A Song of Ice and Fire because the fans already guessed everything and he's forcing himself to change up the story. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is an in-universe work of alternative timeline metafiction by Rita Skeeter. The book is so terrible, and it's canon, according to JKR, that this is the only way I can make it fit in my head. Generally, I don't accept it as canon. Whatever JKR says to the contrary, the books and the universe ended at Deathly Hallows. Ditto our failed Mew clones. Dumbledore was really death, since he at one point had all three of the Deathly Hallows and Harry was able to greet him as an old friend. That Bran in fact did not have the best story. Regular show is an acid trip. The trolls in Frozen used magic to make Hans turn on Anna so Kristoff could have her. Hans never really shows any signs of evil before the reveal. He even has that dumb smitten smile after meeting Anna, so she's a bit of a fixer-upper. That's a minor thing. And get the fiancé out of the way and the whole thing will be fixed if his plan was always really as he said. He risks everything by letting Anna go after Elsa alone, without really even trying to either stop her or go with her. He instructs his guards to make sure no harm comes to Elsa when they go to her palace. He should want her to die in the conflict. Way less messy than bringing her back and trying to have her executed while still marrying Anna. It makes too much sense. Courage the dog is exaggerating normal occurrences into scary things cause he's a dog. The only way to get into Gryffindor is to want to get into Gryffindor. All the other houses are specific traits, where Gryffindor is primarily about bravery. The bravery you need to get in is the bravery to want to be in Gryffindor. Also adds up with Harry being Slytherin Y, Hermione and McGonagall being Ravenclaw Y, and Ron and, if you ask me, Dumbledore being Hufflepuff Y. If anyone is a natural-born Gryffindor that we see, it's Cedric, and he's a Hufflepuff. I'd argue it's cause he didn't want to be Gryffindor. Midichlorians don't cause the Force to manifest, but are drawn to powerful Force users. Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon and Hello by Katy Perry are retellings of the same incident viewed from opposite sides. A tragic miscommunication where Katy thinks that she is being explicit that she isn't into him and just came to dance, and Nicholas is interpreting everything she says as a heartfelt declaration of love and imagining their life together. Edit, Dragonette not Katy Perry. My bad. Cardassians and Bajorans are the same species. While cross-species reproduction is established as being possible in the Star Trek universe, it's also established that this requires genetic modification to make sure the kid actually survives for longer than a few weeks. There are, however, several instances of Cardassian Bajoran children being born to parents who either wouldn't have wanted the child or wouldn't have gone to a doctor to make sure the kid survives. Basically, the theory poses that, using Tachyon streams between the two planets, Cardassia was originally settled by Bajorans, who then developed to be what we know as Cardassians over several thousand years. Assuming similar lifespans as to what humans can get, Cardassians and Bajorans could very well have been genetically the same species with two very distinct phenotypes after that time span, considering that the Native Americans were isolated for about the same time Cardassians would have had to diverge. Another one is that everything produced past first contact actually plays in a third timeline separate of the Kelvin divergence and the main timeline, which could explain the technological differences from what's been established. This timeline was caused by the Borg traveling back in first contact, which altered the course of human, and therefore galactic history. To get to a non-Trek theory, the Marauders map is enchanted in such a way that only the Marauders can see each other on the Marauders map, just in case the map ever ends up in the wrong hands. This theory exists mainly to explain why Fred and George, in the 3 years that Ron has been at Hogwarts, never wondered why their little brother shared his bed with a non-existent student who, for some reason, shares the name of a man who died fighting a serial killer who also betrayed that same brother's best friend's parents. Of course, this is mostly about the books, as Harry does see Peter Pettigrew on the Marauders map in the movies, but in the books, the only one to ever see Peter Pettigrew on the Marauders map is Remus Lupin, who is one of the, at the time, 3 remaining Marauders. Emperor Palpatine, having gained the power to manipulate life from Darth Plagueis the Wise, uses Padme's life energy to save Anakin at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Padme doesn't die of a broken heart. The proof is when Anakin asks about Padme, and Palpatine says that she's dead. How would he know that she died? Sure, you can say that with the Force he saw her die, I guess. Tylee is a non-bender descendant of air nomads. At the end of the thing, MacReady has gasoline in the whiskey bottle. He made all the bottles into Molotov cocktails. He knew he was going to die with the thing, or likely from it, so there was no reason for him to save an entire bottle of just whiskey on his person when that could have been another weapon. At the end, he offers the bottle to Childs, who drinks it as if nothing was wrong. The thing wouldn't know what whiskey tastes like, and reveals Childs as being replaced. MacReady even gives a smirk after he drinks from the bottle. That the Blair Witch never existed, and that Heather was murdered by Josh and Mike. Caillou is a cancer patient. There's no other explanation for why his parents put up with the little shit and his incredibly terrible behavior. Birth control spells built into the Hogwarts school wards. This is 100% my own theory, but it makes sense. Never hear of any students getting pregnant, and it's a co-ed school where kids spend most of the year together. Magic or not, kids are idiots and will fuck up any sort of birth control, even if it's a simple wave of a wand. So I think the founders built it into the school wards. No one can get pregnant on school grounds. Warning, hella spoilers for Gravity Falls. At the end of Gravity Falls, Bill is supposed to be defeated, but he says something backwards right before he dies, which essentially is him trying to use magic to come back to life later. At one point, there was a worldwide official Gravity Falls scavenger hunt, at the end of which there was a Bill statue. Grunkle Stan has been giving the players tapes for clues, and when you're at the end, he suggests you shake his hand, which is not what you're supposed to do. Under any circumstances, don't shake his hand. Now, Bill was defeated by destroying Grunkle Stan's memories after Bill was trapped in his mind. But, Stan regains his memories, so people have theorized that Bill must have come back too and is possessing Grunkle Stan. Based on what I've read about the theories and what has occurred, I definitely think it's true. Hopefully one day they make another season with that being the plot. Praying, edit, another detail I forgot. During the season finale episodes, Bill sings the song, "We'll Meet Again." First off, the implications behind the song itself is already debatable, but to solidify that theory, Grunkle Stan sings the song at the very end of the scavenger hunt tape. If that isn't a practically confirmed theory, I don't fucking know what is. Not sure if it qualifies, but Barney's How I Met Your Mother theory about the Karate Kid. And how Cobra Kai came to be. Joker from The Dark Knight was former military CIA, which explains his skills in weapons and interrogation, as well as that comment about the truck full of soldiers. Marty McFly develops the inability to back down when called chicken in the second movie and on because in the first film, he creates a timeline where his father has confidence, changing the parenting style of his own background. E.T. is a Star Wars movie and by extension Earth is now part of the Star Wars universe. E.T. is shown using Force powers, and when he sees a kid in a Yoda mask, he cries home. Home. Plus, in episode 1 of Star Wars, there are a bunch of E.T.s in the Senate chamber. In the lore, they're from a planet called Brodo Asogi. Moana dies in the thunderstorm. After that, she only meets gods and mystical creatures the rest of the movie. She still must complete her journey to return the heart of Tafiti, and when she does, Tafiti brings her back to life so she can go back to her tribe. The velociraptors in Jurassic Park were genetically modified to be larger so they would bring more visitors. Edit. Apparently they were genetically modified velociraptors that were Utah raptors but based off the Deinonychus. Thanks Reddit for telling me that I'm right and wrong and somehow incorrectly correct. Now can you stop killing my inbox?